Welcome to the channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. Join me today for a review, a comparison review between the 62MAS divers. I have recently reviewed the new SteelDive SD1962, which is a homage of the 62MAS, and in my one of my oldest videos, I reviewed the Heimdallr 62MAS. Now, don't get too excited, anyone. This is not the original. This is one that I modified. It's a Heimdallr case, and I put in a aftermarket 62MAS case. Before I go any further, if you haven't done already, hit the subscribe button, like, comment, join the channel, and support the channel. It's all appreciated. We've got a great community out there. Your subscription will enable me to continue to bring great content and great reviews. So with this review, initially I think we should compare between the SteelDive and the Heimdallr version, and then after that I think we'll compare with the looks, and then we can finally compare both against the original, which I don't have. So I will be doing a comparison on dimensions and in just a few points on the actual aesthetics of the watch. So let's start this comparison off with dimensions. On my right is the Heimdallr, on my left is the SteelDive. So with the Heimdallr you get a 41mm diameter case, you get a 14mm thick case with a lug to lug of 50mm, and between the lugs is 20mm. With the SteelDive on my left, you've got a 42mm diameter, a 15.6 thick case, and a lug to lug of 48mm with 20mm between the lugs. Size wise, you can see already we have a difference in the thickness of the case. Hopefully let's get it around this way. The second noticeable size difference you'll see is within the lugs. Heimdallr at the bottom is 50mm and the SteelDive is a 48mm. 2mm might not seem that much of a difference, but as you can see, when it comes to watches, it is somewhat significant. Diameter, there isn't much of a difference. You've got a 1mm difference on the actual diameter. I believe I think they both look the same dimensionally. Specs, they're exactly the same. You've got sapphire top hat, same thing with the Heimdallr, although the top hat on the SteelDive, I believe, sits slightly higher, so it's more of a box type crystal, and this one sits lower, which no doubt contributes to the difference in the thickness of the cases. They both run the NH35 hand winding and hacking movement, and they both have a ceramic bezel insert, albeit slightly different in style. You've got a fully illuminated bezel insert on the left, and you've got a Lume pip bezel insert on the Heimdallr. Now the Lume pip, it's not countersunk, it's just part of the actual insert. Yes, there's a crack, but that does illuminate in the dark, whereas on the SteelDive you've got the triangle and the whole bezel is illuminated. You've got C3 on the Heimdallr, and you've got BGW9 around the ceramic insert, and C3 on the actual dial and hands. We'll compare the looms a little bit later. Let's get a closer look at the dial. So indices, because they are homaging the 62MAS, they are very similar. I think the SteelDive indice on the left is noticeably bigger at the 12 o'clock mark. You've got a shark logo at 12, 200 proof on the SteelDive on the left, and the Heimdallr you've got automatic 300. Now if we take a closer look at the hands, I believe the hands and the design on the hands, it is very similar, if not exactly the same. So more than likely they use the same supplier. Moving on to the crown, of course you can see the crown on the SteelDive is noticeably bigger, whereas the crown on the Heimdallr, it is a bit smaller. The bezel, you do on the Heimdallr have a very tight bezel. Yeah, ignore that. I have actually messed this watch up. I took the bezel apart, I've bent it, I've actually destroyed this watch. But yeah, ignore that. In fact, what we'll do, we'll compare with the second Heimdallr with the Seiko dial, aftermarket Seiko dial. Yeah. So the bezel, again, between the two bezel movements, one's very tight, one's very loose, but neither of them sound the greatest, to be absolutely honest. However, the bezel on the actual Heimdallr, it is a lot tighter, with very minimal back play. And same with very minimal back play on the actual SteelDive. Both cases have a similar finish. You've got brushing around the actual front of the case, circular brushing on the sides. You've got this high polish, and that's across all of the cases. Case backs, you know, indifferent as well. One stamped with Heimdallr, one stamped with SteelDive. So there's no need for comparison across that. The other thing we can look at now is bracelet strap options. Heimdallr, I think since they were produced, has always provided a stainless steel bracelet, which is of a really high quality, to be honest. I think it sits pretty flush into the case. It does have a somewhat unconventional design which holds the end lugs in. End lugs are solid, but there's a long pin that actually goes through the whole case and through the end lugs. It can be quite tricky taking it in and out. And Heimdallr also they'll do diver straps as well, but they also do the waffle strap, which is another bonus, as this is a very sought after strap, and it completes as you can see in this modded watch, it completes the desired effect, gives you that vintage, almost original 6217 look. SteelDive, pour on the straps, no doubt about that. There are also other contenders. We have San Martin. I don't have a San Martin to hand. I've said this when I reviewed the Heimdallr. I believe the San Martin, due to the dial color option available, they give that lovely grey dial. It looks probably closest to the original. It does look different enough as well. However, I think the case might be the same, but I can't really comment on San Martin, so we'll exclude that at this comparison. Just keep it between what I have in front of my face. Now, further to that, just commenting on the case, with the Heimdallr cases, you do feel a slight edginess around the lugs, and I just want to see if that is the same, more or less the same on the SteelDive, but because of the shorter lugs, it sits on the wrist a lot nicer than the Heimdallr. Let's take this chance to do a wrist shot comparison. Let's take a look. Let's move you out the way. Let me get the double barrel wrist shot. I mean, they both look fantastic on the wrist, and I do really like this bracelet from Heimdallr. Comes with a milled clasp as well. Transformed the watch slightly, gives it a different more modern, up-to-date look. And with the SteelDive, the rubber gives it a vintage look, but when you pay closer attention to the strap, it's not the best. I'd prefer this kind of strap over that any day. I think at this point, I'd like to do a lume comparison to see where we sit with the different looms on both dials. Hopefully, as you can see, the lume on the actual Heimdallr, it is very bright, very clear. It's worth mentioning that I haven't given it a flash from the UV light. This is just the natural light is picked up in the room. It's very strong lume, and it does last quite a long time. I've had this watch almost 8 months, so I've got a great grasp of what it's like living with this actual watch. And here's the lume on the SteelDive. You can see straight away the difference. You've got a fully lumed bezel insert, BGW9 and C3 on the dial. I'd say it's equally as great as the 62MAS Heimdallr. There's no difference in the brightness or the quality, just the fact that the bezel inserts are slightly different. Now, I don't think there's anything more to compare between them. I've tried to leave the subjectives out of it and just to give a visual comparison. Apart from what's obvious, what's my preference? I like bits from both watches. I like on the SteelDive, I like the case lug to lug, but I don't like how thick it is. Crown, I actually prefer the crown on the SteelDive as well. But for me, on the Heimdallr 62MAS, I actually prefer the way that dial looks. And I prefer the shape or the feel of the bezel. It's a lot slimmer than the one that is on the SteelDive. In terms of bezel action, I'd say the both. There's one of them is not clearly better, if that makes sense. They both sound a bit funny and ratchety. Just the bezel on the Heimdallr is a little bit tighter, but I feel it feels better. I personally like the blue and green lume combination. Case backs, this makes no difference. I'm very indifferent, but I will have to settle with the Heimdallr. Now, it's not because I've had it and I've got some sort of favoritism towards it, just the fact that they provided Bracelet with it, and the prices are very similar. You'll also get just a slimmer profile on the case. Yes, it is a bit longer. The fit on a smaller wrist of the SteelDive would be a lot better than the Heimdallr, but I would ultimately choose the Heimdallr. Now, that being said, the final bit of comparison. Obviously, I have no clue what the Seiko 62MAS 6217 at 8000 looks like or is like. Should I say? I know what it looks like. You can get the pictures from anywhere. So a few noticeable differences just by looking at pictures. The bezel insert has a 12 o'clock illuminated pip, and that pip is the one that sits inside the bezel insert. None of these two have the pip. I believe probably due to QC issues, because they do tend to fall out. The dials, as you can see, I do have the original, well, aftermarket original 6217. When I say original, sorry, I don't mean that this is an original 6217 dial. It's an aftermarket dial. However, it's more or less the same as the genuine one. Like I said, design wise, there's not much of a difference. They've done a good job homaging the dials. The 62MAS on the Heimdallr looks probably closest in style to the original Seiko. Crowns, the crowns on the 62MAS Heimdallr is again closer to the original Seiko. However, the crown on the SteelDive is most similar to the actual 62MAS reissue. I believe the SLA 17. The diameter, both the watches are nowhere near. The actual diameter of the original watch was 37mm with a 13mm thickness, so the Heimdallr isn't too far off the thickness. And the lug to lug was 19mm. Again, that was quite common because the Captain Willett 6105 was also a 19mm, but you had a lug to lug of 46. So on the dimensions, I'd say the SteelDive is probably closest, minus the actual thickness. So there's not much between them, but there's enough for them to be different, if that makes sense. So I think this is quite good now, so there can be a real comparison. Whereas on some of the other watches, they use the same cases like Marine Masters, tuners. Now, without having seen San Martin, which I'm excluding, I'd say between them there is a good amount of difference, and I think that's good. I like that, rather than have just, you know, the same cases. Then, you know, it's just visual differences. Overall, I think both brands, both watches, do a very good job of homaging the 6217. The Heimdallr clearly looks probably more like it, in my opinion. But as mentioned, it's the watch game, very, very, very subjective. So as mentioned, I think I'll end the review with, you know what, I like bits from both of them, but I prefer the Heimdallr. And that is that. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope there was enough information for you guys to gauge the difference, and if you were deciding which one to get, hopefully I did enough of a good job that made your decision easier. So please subscribe, like, and let me know what you think in the comments. I look forward to reading the comments. In the video, I'll have a link in the description for the AliExpress store for the SteelDive. I think the Heimdallr, you can go to the website. Of course, like always, I'll leave my own details, and if you've got any questions or any sales queries. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and I will see you soon, hopefully.